My next guest on the Giant Minds podcast is Jayne Taylor from the Elephant Group, which is a organisation really quite close to our hearts here at Geiston that we've supported for quite a long time in helping deliver their really lofty ambition in the world of young people's education. Tune in to find out more. I really hope you enjoy this conversation. There's a lot of challenges in that space, and I think it's a really fast-changing area where there's loads that we can do and improve. So, Jayne, thank you very much for joining us on the Giant Minds podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be back here in Bristol.
Yeah, it's really, really great to have you here because we've actually got quite a long history between Geiston and the Elephant Group. Before we go into that, do you just want to give our listeners and viewers a little introduction on you and kind of your journey and how you've got here?
Sure. So I worked in higher education for about 18 years. I worked across a number of different departments. I've worked in admissions, I've worked in recruitment, I've worked in widening participation and access. And by the end, I was the head of student recruitment and widening participation at a university for quite a while. And I think I had that post-COVID moment where I was like, I don't want to carry on doing this for the rest of my life. I've been a very happy career there, but I was ready for a second career. And I think most people these days, we don't just stick to one career our whole lives, and I wanted to do something different. And I really wanted to feel like I was using those things that I'd learned at working in higher education for such a long time for good. And so I decided to go and work for the Elephant Group, and I became their first CEO. So before me, we had a managing director, but I was the first CEO to sort of take it from its startup into an established charity. To establish
maturity.
Yeah, well, yeah, could say
that. But that's not like a massive career shift. I mean, it is from universities into charity, but the sectors, there's a lot of sector relevance there. So do you want to just explain a little bit about what the Elephant Group does?
Yeah, sure. So absolutely sector relevance. The Elephant Group recognises that talent is everywhere, but the opportunity isn't. So what we are there to do is to support students who are in state schools to achieve places in the country's most selective universities. So we say top third for the top third. We want the top third of students in state schools to go on to the top third of universities and highly selective courses like medicine, dentistry, law, architecture, those sorts of courses. So we work with schools. We work in their sixth forms to support their students to go on to be wildly successful, getting in and getting on at university.
That's an amazingly ambitious and laudable claim. I mean, I think that's as a mission, that sounds like a big mountain to climb.
It really is, and we've made some progress, but we still see that although it might not be the thing that everyone's talking about anymore, it is still an issue. If you go to an independent school, you're twice as likely to get into a top third university than if you go to a state school. So it's about levelling that playing field. It's not about doing down independent schools. We think they do a great job at educating students. What we're saying is that we want to make sure that we support our students through the 3 A's of aspiration, application and attainment to make sure that they get to the right places which match their ambition and their ability.
Great. So Geiston and the Elephant Group have quite a long history, as I said before. We actually started working with the Elephant Group before you were even there.
Good, yes.
We were introduced via a partner of ours, Newton Europe, Newton Impact, who were doing some work through their charitable arm with the Elephant Group to help enable the data and analysis of what's going on and to provide that as a big lift to the Elephant Group. And we kind of took that over and converted it into software and then took it forwards. What was it like coming in and seeing that asset in there? As quite unusual for an organisation that size.
I just described it, and maybe I shouldn't describe it like this, as being in a small house with a Porsche outside. It's kind of like this amazing, incredible way of managing our data. And at the time, we were a really small charity. So to be able to come in and see that we had that, it really resonated with my aims for the charity, which was to make sure that we could always demonstrate impact. that we understood who our recipients were, and we understood that the programme was having the intended impact on those recipients. And I think without that data, without a place to put that data and to be able to analyse that data, there's no way we could do that. So it's been a really important part of our strategic journey since I started around data collection, data analysis, which we just couldn't have done without you. And honestly, without Newton have been an incredible partner of ours since we started. They still work very closely with us, as you do. And you know, charities like ours cannot survive and cannot grow without the support of industry. So we're hugely grateful to both.
Great. It's really great to be able to give that opportunity and make that some noticeable difference. I think it doesn't really matter whether you're a charity or a business, small or large. I think knowing about your data and how that relates to your activity is obviously important to everyone.
Definitely, and you know, things are really hard in the charity world at the moment, and one of the things that funders want to see and what partners want to see is that you're making a difference, that you're actually doing the things, you're investing that important money into areas which are actually making a difference. And last year we were able to report that 94% of our students applied to a top third university, and 91% of our students received an offer from a top third university. So we're able to start seeing that difference, and we're able to look at the cohort, the kind of students that we're working with, what backgrounds they're coming from, and we're able to see that they are coming from, majority of our students come from background where going to university isn't the norm, and from postcodes where it's not usual for students to be going on to these top third universities. So we know we're making a difference, and we know we're making a difference in the right places.
So many of them first generation to attend further education?
Yeah, many of them first generation, many of them fit into quartiles 1 and 2 of the indices of multiple deprivation. Many of them are from ethnic backgrounds where they are either new to the country or their parents were new to the country. So lots and lots of different measures and metrics by which we can pass that data, but through that lens we can see that these are students who would not normally have necessarily gone on to these top universities, and we're seeing that really big impact of them not only applying but being successful in their applications. So we know we're doing the right things.
That's brilliant. And what are those kind of key things that enable these young people to succeed? Because it's not necessarily the hard skills, is it?
No. And I think that, I mean, look, we could do an entire 3-hour podcast on widening participation and all the elements, but I think for your listeners, I'll try and keep it fairly brief. But I think it's recognising that there are a number of different factors which impact on a young person's decisions. Part of that is social, some of that is cultural, some of that will just be around what is around you tends to be what you tend to reflect. So it's recognising that students need to see that these are options which are open and available to them. But they also need, as you rightly say, the skills. And one of the things that our second programme that we run is called the Meta Method, which is a metacognition skills programme. So that's teaching the skills of the future, those AI, I would say AI proof, but that makes it sound negative because I'm very positive about AI, but it's about saying these are kind of cross-dimensional skills which students need to be able to develop. And they are in self-awareness, in being critical, in being metacognitive, understanding how we think and learn, and being able to control and regulate your own learning. So we're not only supporting students in those 3 A's of aspiring, so knowing that you can go there, supporting them in those complex applications that medicine and Oxbridge and law require from you, but we're also supporting them in their attainment. So how do I study and revise? How do I develop the kind of skills which will mean that I'm learning the types of things I need to learn and can respond and react to changes academically or in my life through the development of these metacognitive skills? And research shows that if a student is metacognitive, they have 8+ months progress on someone who isn't metacognitive.
Wow.
Research also tells us that metacognition tends to be not developed in students who come from lower resource backgrounds. So where you've got more challenges in your background, you're less likely to develop those metacognitive skills. So again, it's about leveling that playing field, and not just for education, but for life, because these are the sorts of skills that we look for in employers, in employees. We want people to come who are flexible,
Absolutely.
who are adaptable, who know how to learn, who can respond to ongoing challenges. And although we recognise it's important to have some domain-specific skill, having these kind of cross-contextual skills will have a massive impact on these students' ability to make the most of their degrees once they graduate.
Yeah, and it's that learning to learn and how to assimilate knowledge and reuse it that does seem to be the most important thing, because with the sort of boom of AI, we've got all this knowledge at our fingertips. We can get the hard stuff actually remarkably easily, a lot of it. But it's how we use that and how we deploy it that is kind of the key, isn't it?
And I think in some ways we're at danger of becoming a two-tier society, in the sense that we've got people who know how to use the information critically, how to think, have systems thinking, how to think about things in a complex way, who understand how they think and learn and are able to manage that in challenging situations, and people who don't necessarily have those skills. And I think, there's no way that the skills should be democratized across the country and taught where as much as possible in schools, but also at university and in your early career.
Yeah, and it's not even so simple as just being a digital divide, is it? It's not just about access to technology. It's more about it being open to a different way of thinking.
100%. And I think if you know how to think in this way, whatever challenge which is brought to you, AI is the challenge right now. Well, we know that in 10, 20 years, those challenges might be completely different. So we need to be able to support students to develop the kind of skills which means that they're able to adapt, to be flexible, to be confident in the face of ongoing and constant challenge, which is the kind of society I think we're living in now. We see that with the climate crisis, we see that with the change in digital technology, how rapid that is. Just because you've learnt one domain-specific skill, I'm sure in your industry, that changes constantly. So being able to react and adapt to that, you need to have almost a wrapper of skills which allow you to do that. And those who do will succeed, and those who don't will be left behind, I think.
Yeah. So I think one thing that's clear from the research is just the rate of change is increasing. So everyone's expected to move further faster, learn more faster, and change their ways of working, their processes more regularly and more deeply. And that seems to be, to me, I'm observing that as perhaps sitting in the heart of the mental health crisis in the world at the moment. And a big part of the solution to that seems to be resiliency. And a lot of that probably comes back to these metacognitive skills.
Completely. And I think, to be able to develop the confidence to believe that you are able and have the skills to face any challenge that comes at you, that's where we develop true confidence. And I think there's a lot of students who were really impacted by the COVID crisis, the situation there. I think there was a lot of contract broken between society and young people at that time. And I think what we see in a lot of young people is that there is a lack of confidence in their own skills. And I think the answer to that is not to try and say, well, let's try and make everything easier, because I think that actually doesn't put students, I don't think it gives students enough credit. Young people today are amazing. I love working with teenagers. They're absolutely brilliant. We have a brilliant generation of teenagers coming up. And actually what we need to do is to support them to create those skills, to develop those skills where they are able to react and adapt to change, because we know that is what is coming. And they are perfectly capable of doing that. But what we need to do is make explicit what is so implicit in a lot of adults who have perhaps lived a long time, had a lot of experience. We understand how to approach these new challenges. But that's all quite implicit. We don't necessarily talk about it in a way that's really clear. And I think what we found about the meta method is it breaks down metacognition into easily digestible chunks so that students can learn that. And one of the words that we've been described by schools who've used it said it's sticky. It sticks with the young people. They understand about learning about themselves. So they know they have that self-awareness. How do I learn? What do I find difficult? How do I react when I find something difficult? We've got the knowing your strategies. What's in my toolkit? So what can I draw on when I'm faced with that new challenge? And then we've got knowing the task. What specifically am I being asked to do? And do I know while I'm doing it that I'm doing the right thing? So that constant planning, monitoring, evaluating of their learning. And once you have these skills and this kind of idea and this framework, you can take that wherever you go. And I think that builds mental resilience. It builds academic resilience. And I think it supports students to approach these big challenges which are coming and be able to assess them and respond to them much more successfully.
Yeah, and when you describe it like that, I kind of feel like you're spoiling these young people. That it's wasted on them. There's actually so many older people that really need this stuff too.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because we started this project. And actually a big help to us was the Office for Students gave us some funding via Uni Connect, and we were able to start this off, and we have piloted a number of different schemes. And it's got to the point now when we talk about it, we have a lot of adults coming to us and saying, could you come into my team and do some training on this, and could you look at this? So it's something that we're looking at expanding into, because we recognise that metacognitive skills are for everybody all the way along their journey, and we don't stop learning and we can't stop learning. And actually, when you've been out of education for a long time, having the confidence to go back and say, gosh, I've got to learn a new way of doing things, or I've got to find a new approach, can be a really big challenge. So we know that metacognition can support people all the way through, and it's something that we'd like to do more of with organisations.
Yeah, and when you think about the rate of change, it seems that when one goes through one's life, you have a lot of change when you're younger. You're learning a lot of stuff, and then when you move into a career, that rate of change for an individual can slow quite substantially. A lot of people, you can find they might have done the same job for 10 years, and suddenly the AI is kind of coming in and changing all this, and the demands are being put on them to reverse that trajectory and increase their rate of change again. And so when you've settled into this low rate of change for a long time, it feels like that's actually like a situation you might be in where you really need these skills and to be able to pick up the pace again, basically.
Definitely, and as you say, it's about confidence for all of us at any age to be able to face these challenges. And I think, I certainly feel from my experience that, I was in the same job, in the same place for 18 years before I did this kind of crazy thing and left. And, and understanding what that rate of change was like for me was part of the genesis of this program of I needed to learn again. I was in a position of suddenly going from being the person who knew everything to not knowing anything. But actually, for me, that has been an incredible journey, because I've seen myself develop massively over a short space of time that I think wouldn't have happened. But we need to have the confidence to do that, and I use metacognition to support myself through that process. So I think, and I think with the AI change, and I don't know, we call it an AI revolution. I don't know if you call it that. I'd be interested to hear what you think about this. I think we have to train people up to be able to say, how do we use technology in an ethical and responsible way with integrity, and teach that from students all the way through to those working in an office, in various businesses and industries. How can we use this technology for good?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's exactly it. To me, AI is another tool. It's a very, very powerful tool. It does need to be wielded with ethics and in the right way. I think that's a particular challenge in the education sector.
Absolutely.
So I think teaching children, young people, how to use AI without cheating is a massive challenge that exists. I think in the workplace that's less of an issue. I think the ethical issues in the workplace are more around being genuine and not presenting something as something it isn't. I think that's the kind of key with AI at the moment, is to always be transparent about what's come from where and who's responsible for it and those kind of things. I think those are the big ethical challenges in business. But I think in education has this unique package of challenges, which are you need to teach young people skills, you need to test how effective they are at executing those skills. One of the skills you want to teach them, I think, is how to use these new tools effectively. And there's this massive divergence of approach on that. I think a lot of people are scared. So we were just talking earlier, one of my children's schools very much in the advanced, progressive end of this, and are providing the students with AI tools specifically for learning to help coach them and mentor them and bring them on, which I think is fantastic. But as we were discussing earlier, there's the opposite, and we've had our interns in recently, some of whom basically being told if you use AI you're getting kicked off the course.
100%. And I would say that's more common. That's the common approach, is it's cheating, don't use it, don't touch it. It's a bit like going back to the 80s of Nancy Reagan, just say no. It seems to be that very much approach, kind of like it's like drugs or something. Just don't touch it. If you go near it, everything will fall apart. And I just think that's a profoundly unhelpful way to approach these new challenges. But what I will say is, our teachers are complete heroes to me. They are doing an incredible job under tremendous pressure with huge amounts of change within the education systems. They really are, and we work very closely with lots and lots of schools and lots of teachers, and they do an absolutely brilliant job with our young people, and I have a huge amount of respect for the profession. It's a very hard profession because everything is always changing and they're having to keep up all the time. But I think that's where charities and industry can come in, and I think connecting industry, connecting charities with schools to say, let us support you with this. These are the curriculum experts in schools. They are teachers, they are experts in their subjects, and they are guiding our young people, but they cannot be expected to do everything for everybody. And I think where the challenges for the third sector and for industry is to come in and say, how can we support you to support our young people, to develop these skills, to use AI responsibly, to understand how it can be there, and to understand what the digital divide actually means now. We talk about digital poverty. There are young people who don't have access to the kind of digital devices that others do, but we equally have young people who won't have access to the latest version of ChatGPT 5 or whatever it is that's happening at the moment. And that creates a further inequality within our society. So it's compound disadvantage, as we would call it. So you're already at a disadvantage because perhaps your school is in an area that is struggling, it has low resources, there's not many students going on to university, there's a lot of pressure on the school. Then you perhaps come from a background where there is low resources, people are struggling, people are having to work very long hours. Then you're on the top of that, you need devices, you need the digital you need to have some kind of access to the digital world that you are then not being taught how to use. So I think that compound disadvantage is where we should be coming in and say, how can we help, how can we support in order to create equity across this digital revolution that we're having.
I think it's a real challenge because I think schools are typically, and very much agree with this, should be phone-free environments in learning and so on. So you need to do that to maintain attention, and there's all sorts of disciplinary reasons and all that sort of stuff that sits behind it. But then, actually, the students all have these incredibly powerful computers in their pockets that can serve this stuff up. And when they're not in the educational environment, a lot of children, particularly from more deprived backgrounds, don't have necessarily the support and encouragement and the right knowledge around them to help them in their studies outside of school. So they're just not really doing that much of that. And you contrast that with sort of my children and children of people I know. We work with ChatGPT to help our children learn. So my oldest has on his phone, he's renamed his ChatGPT to be called Bernard. And so he'll be doing his homework and we will say, right, I think maybe we should get Bernard's help on this. And we'll ask Bernard and he'll join in the conversation and talk mode, and we'll provide this enormous insight from this huge body of knowledge, way more than either me or my son have at the table, and the assistance they can give and the perspective they can give, it's amazing. But without that sort of awareness of what's there and how it can help and how to introduce it into the conversation, people are going to be missing out on that.
Absolutely, and I think I think that I love that example because I'm just having some kind of flashback of me sat at the table. My children are older and sitting at the table trying to do fractions with them and just thinking, I can't remember. I don't know how you do fractions. I can remember how we did things or how we did particular bits of maths and it's changed, or I just can't remember how to do it. So being able to bring in a digital assistance at that point would have been great. I mean, that does sound really helpful. But I don't think that's a universal. The way you're using it, I'm going to be honest, is kind of the elite way to use it. Because you have the knowledge, you have the experience, you know how to do things with that technology which are ethical, which are supportive. And I think, again, it's about democratizing that knowledge, and that's not your responsibility necessarily as an individual, but as a society, we need to be able to say, this is a really useful way to use this. Otherwise, I think these gaps are going to widen. Particularly in education, but these are really, really vital ways of using it in such responsible ways. And I think there's something around how universities can start working, academics in universities should also be working with the rest of our education system to say, this is the kind of skills we want from students when they get here. So how should they be using it? How do we look for students using it so that can be taught earlier on in the school, and that schools can feel confident that they're doing and saying the right things, because it's very challenging for schools. You know, the last thing anyone wants to be accused of is plagiarism, you know, and how do we use this? And it's just one more thing on the plate of people who are already incredibly up to their eyeballs in things that they're having to do. But,
and
that's amazing.
And from a student's perspective, it's really difficult to hold the line, because if you're given that device, and
Pandora's box,
and it
all
has
the answers
the ability
are there.
to just do your homework, you know, the temptation is enormous to just do that.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that we're also trying to teach young people, is that love of learning, that learning is the point. The point, yes, we want students to progress, we want them to go to the kind of universities which match their ambition and their potential and their ability, but we want them to love that learning and to recognise that learning is valuable for society for learning's sake, which I think is something we're losing a little bit, is that idea that just learning how to learn, to being in a learning environment, has a huge impact on you as a human being, and as human beings how we interact within society. There is huge value in learning, and to, you know, you don't want to have to, you know, have an AI dupe doing your work for you. I tried to describe it to somebody once as, it's a bit like wearing a really, really thick filter when you're having a photograph taken. You know, eventually it just stops looking and sounding like you. You know, it just stops being you. And it's the same with your learning. If you use it too much, if you use it in the wrong ways, it stops being your learning. You stop getting the advantage, and in the end, you personally are at a disadvantage. So I think it's teaching young people from a young age that the learning it has a point to it within itself. It's not just always about a piece of paper, a qualification or a job. It's about the importance of understanding ourselves and our whole human experience. And I think that we lose that, then we fall into the trap of using AI just to get the right answers, because we're just ticking boxes, and that's all that matters. Yeah, we're getting quite profound now, but that's my perspective.
I have a theory on the sort of loss of love of learning, that particularly in further education, that the death knell might have been sounded by the increasing cost of further education, because you probably have a lot more data on this than my hunch, but I think the number of arts students is declining massively, quite heavily. And that's kind of an indication that people are seeing further education as a monetary investment that needs a payoff, rather than going there to experience learning and that prolonging of that phase of life in which you're just kind of sponging stuff in and experimenting, is actually becoming more of the start of a career.
Yeah, and I think the challenge with the arts is the kind of skills that you develop when you are a arts humanities student are exactly the kind of skills that we really desperately need in society today. That critical analysis, that being able to weigh up arguments, to be able to think deeply about complex issues, weigh up different sides of arguments, and look back in our history. You know, the decline in history is I think a terrible thing for our society. We need to have people who are students of history, who are able to recognise where we've been before to where we're going to become now, and they need to come from a variety of backgrounds. So where we say yes, we see there's a decline, where we see the biggest decline is from those sections of society where the financial burden of higher education is its greatest. So you start to have this payoff. It's costing me and my mum and dad a lot of money. I've got to do something that's going to get me into a job at the end of it, when actually, you know, most degrees are developing its skills in young people. I would say all degrees, studying at that level, you will develop skills which will be incredibly useful. And they're those meta skills that we're talking about, those wraparound skills where you should be able to turn your hand to different types of things. And of course, there's still a need and a requirement for domain-specific skills. But when domain-specific skills become the be-all and end-all, that's when we see people who are able to be flexible and adaptable in their careers, because, well, I've trained as this. Well, that doesn't exist anymore. What do I do?
Yeah, and I think the domain-specific ones are quite interesting, because that's potentially where the biggest shift is going to be happening in the demands of jobs. Yeah. So, you know, doctors need to know a huge amount about anatomy and all the rest of it, and so on. Now that knowledge is available on tap. Like 100% on tap. Yeah. What's probably more important now in medicine is how you relate to your patient and make sure that you're getting the real information from them rather than like something that they want to present for some other sort of reason, or you want to understand the impact that their ailment is having on their well-being. You know, they're the more human elements that are actually potentially more important. And similarly, you know, even if you want to be something like an engineer or something, you know, there's a lot of knowledge that is just available on tap. So it needs to reframe what we actually need out of education and what we need in those jobs. What we need out of software developers now is different to what we needed, you know, a little while ago. I mean, there's still a lot of similarities. You still need people to have a certain level of expertise, a certain amount of domain familiarization, domain immersement, but the hard knowledge is becoming less and less important, it seems.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, as you said, I think you rightly say we need to continue with some domain-specific knowledge because we need to know when AI gets it wrong. You know, so and I think that being able to be critical and say, actually, is this right? That doesn't look right. And you know, we know when something doesn't look right because we understand the information. So there is an element of that. But you're so right that, you know, the things which make us, you know, human are the things which we learn through education and we learn through going through those processes. And we learn around, you know, when we're pushed in ways which are complex at university. And I think that I think as a country, we do university brilliantly, by the way. And I think it's a hugely undervalued thing that we have in this university. I think our universities are, you know, they are world leading. For example, Cambridge University is 5th in the world for employability. So it's a fifth best university to go to in the world to be employed by, you know. So they have all sorts of relevance in terms of economic but I think that we do lose that sense that just going to university to do a degree in something that you love will create the skills of the future, and we're not talking enough about that. And they are the skills which I think will protect society from the kind of dangers that people talk about when they talk about AI. Yeah.
As a Cambridge philosophy graduate, I feel entirely vindicated by all of this conversation, by the way. It's definitely working in my favour.
That just shows, you know, I met a lady on the train the other day she did music at Oxford and is now a top lawyer. These things are not, you know, we need to not see them as a linear pathway. I don't think careers are linear anymore anyway.
Certainly much less linear than they used to be.
Absolutely. I think, so I think that, you know, being able to push yourself to go to the best university you can go to for your skills and your ambition is so important for everybody, regardless of their background.
So we started off talking about, you know, our partnership, how Geiston and Newton and the Elephant Group have kind of all been working together to help solve things. Let's just go back and dive into that a little bit more. How do charities manage on their own? It feels like a difficult thing to do.
I mean, I think anybody who's listening to this who's involved in the charity world will know that this is probably one of the toughest times. I mean, I've not been involved in this world for that long, but, you know, I hear from people that this is the hardest time it is, you know, to be generating, to get income, to getting partnerships. I think where the charity world can really be at its best is when it works in collaboration. You know, I think we need to see ourselves as a whole society, and the third sector is part of that society. So having industry partners to come in with their expertise and give not just money, but time, experience, incredible databases, incredible IT support, incredible sort of software support that you've done, or the kind of amazing support that Newton provides for us in terms of their consultants, really is the thing that can move a charity out of being constantly hand to mouth to being able to grow, being able to do more and have bigger impact. So it's, for me, there's something very much around how can we not use that kind of data, use the kind of things that you're supporting us with to support us, but also to sharpen our strategy and to help us move forward in the world. So it's actually at a higher level than simply giving us some money or here we go, have this. It's about working collaboratively and together to say, how can we now be more strategic in the way that we have our mission, in our goals and our impact. So I think there's something very much around, you know, supporting us to build that capacity, being able to develop our own skills in these areas, coaching and supporting organisations like mine to do things, you know, how can we do it better? How can we do it sharper? And use the same skills of industry in the charity world. There's no reason for us to be less sharp than businesses. You know, we should be on the cutting edge of things, and working in that collaborative way will achieve that.
Yeah, and certainly there's no shortage of purpose and drive in the third sector. You know, and that's really, a huge asset that needs to be harnessed and helped. I'm just going to give a little plug out to Tech for Good Southwest, have their AI peer network locally here, which is a really good conversational space for charities and other organisations to connect with more technical organisations that know how to use AI and what it can do for them, really for some quite basic stuff as well as for some of the more advanced things. And there's some good partnerships, opportunities in the area also through Quartet, who I'll give a little plug for. They match charities with people who can give their time. But a lot of this seems to be happening quite regionally, so I think it must be a bit of a challenge to find those people and make those connections. There's no obvious go-to place, is there?
No, and I've often spoken of this, that, even within the education sector, we're like I describe it, we should be like a patchwork quilt, in that we should all be connected to one another, and we should be able to be spending time connecting up different opportunities, but there's no central place to sort of connect that. We need sort of like Hinge for charities and industry, where we kind of, what do you need and what do you want and how can we connect up? Because I think there is this huge challenge there. I'm constantly saying, just find me a door that I can open, but without knowing who the right people are, what the industry partners need, what the charity partners need, it's very, very difficult. But if anybody wants to work with the Elephant Group, we're very much open to working with lots of different organisations and charities. So, I truly believe in that collaborative problem solving.
Yeah, and often it's just a coffee, right? I mean, I think that's a great place to start. It's not to assume that like you're putting yourself in for 3 weeks worth of work. Just
absolutely. I think just speaking to I think often when industry speaks to charities, they see the challenge that they're facing and quite how they could leverage their skills and experience to do that. I think there's often, as you say, quite a simple solution, but the time for charities, we are so normally so up against it in terms of our time and our resources, that just having someone come in to relieve some of that pressure, provide a bit of expertise, can just mean everything to us and really make a difference in terms of impact.
Yeah, the thing that always makes me despair a little bit about charities is just how much of what sort of a big proportion of a charity's time and effort is generally spent just trying to get the money to keep going.
Absolutely.
Compared to like what they really want to do is the service delivery and making the impact.
Yeah, that is the biggest challenge, and I think it's more of a challenge today than it's ever been. There are fewer opportunities, there's fewer government contracts, there's fewer trusts and foundations providing funding than there's ever been. And I think lots and lots of charities are really, really struggling, and we don't get the kind of investment in the third sector that you get in the business sector. So we are constantly chasing your tail and also chasing funding, which may not fully align to your mission, and something that we very much don't do at the Elephant Group. We're all about partnership working and how we can work with partners sort of symbiotically in order to keep ourselves going. But it's a huge, huge challenge, and I would really ask industry partners to reach out to any charity locally or nationally if they feel they have capacity to do so, because I think without us, society would be so much less. And I think that the impact the third sector has on society is so huge compared to the kind of resources that we're actually currently receiving to do that work. Yeah,
I mean, I think it certainly is very efficient. Like generally speaking, the sector is quite efficient in terms of how it operates, certainly compared to centralised government ways of working, which can become quite bureaucratic quite quickly.
I couldn't possibly comment.
Yeah. Great. It's been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for coming to join us. I really wish you all the best in your expansion into providing the services more broadly around metacognition to more people, and good luck in that really ambitious mission.
Thank you so much, and thank you massively from the bottom of my heart to Geiston for all your support you've given us over the years. We really couldn't do it without you.
You're very, very welcome indeed.